Success is not a matter of matter. It's a matter of mind. Hello, everyone. Today we're going to talk about a story, but not the kind you'd find in your typical motivational book. This one's personal. The truth is, we're all caught up in this whirlwind of trying to be successful, whether it's at work, in relationships, or with our health. But there's something important you probably won't survive without realizing. Success is not a matter of time. It's a matter of mind. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Drop your location and the time where you're watching from. Always curious where in the world my words are landing. Now, let's get comfortable and let's get started today. It starts, like most things do, with a shattered dream. The thing about dreams is they're beautiful, right? They sparkle, they shine, and you convince yourself that if you just work hard enough, you'll wake up one day with all your wishes neatly packed into your reality. The kind of dream where you think you can just hop on the fast track and get there before anyone else does. Except the track you're on doesn't even exist. Or maybe it does, but it's littered with obstacles you didn't see coming. I had that dream, the kind that keeps you up at night. I thought that by my late 20s, I'd have everything figured out. Everyone around me seemed to. They had the perfect job, the perfect relationship, and here I was, still trying to patch together a life that made sense. My story wasn't unique, yet it felt like the universe had a personal vendetta against me. I remember the exact moment it all came crashing down. I just launched a project I thought was going to change everything. I spent months preparing, perfecting every detail, crafting an image that was supposed to be the key to success. When the launch day came, I stood there staring at the screen, watching the numbers crawl in slower than a snail with a bad attitude. That's when it hit me. There was no magic formula, no shortcuts to success. I felt like I'd been chasing a mirage, something that only existed in my head. The whole thing was built on expectations and not reality. The hardest part, though, was facing the fact that I had built up my whole world around a lie I told myself. Now, you probably think this is the part where I say, I went back to the drawing board and everything turned out fine. But no, it wasn't that easy. It was more like a slow, agonizing realization that no matter how much I worked, no matter how much I believed in the fairy tale, things weren't going to just happen for me. Funny thing is, though, that's when the real story began. So there I was, crushed, confused, and questioning everything I thought I knew about success. It's kind of like when you're walking down the street, humming your favorite song, and out of nowhere, you trip on a crack and eat dirt. You never saw it coming, and you have that moment of disbelief. How did that even happen? This whole idea of success that I'd been sold, this shiny, glamorous dream that social media and books and motivational speakers had fed me, suddenly felt like a hollow lie. It was a mirage, a beautiful, seductive mirage that disappears the moment you try to grab it. That's when the weight of the world started to settle on me. What I didn't know then, and what I was about to learn the hard way, was that success doesn't show up with neon lights and a marching band. It's not some magical formula you can Google or get from watching your favorite influencer's morning routine video. Success is messy. It's ugly. And more importantly, it's fleeting if you don't know how to hold on to it. I used to believe that if I could just work hard enough, I'd hit the jackpot. That there would be this magical moment where everything would click. But I'm here to tell you something most people don't want to admit. There is no single moment of clarity that changes everything. There's no big, moment where the clouds part and you suddenly know the secret to the universe. Instead, what happens is this. You get tired. You get worn down. You start doubting yourself. And if you don't quit, and let me tell you, I considered it more times than I can count, something starts to shift. The illusion of instant success begins to fade, and in its place, something more real starts to emerge. I still believe in that dream, but my idea of it was about to change forever. It wasn't about getting there faster than everyone else anymore. It wasn't about the shiny image or the status symbols. It was about something deeper, something quieter, something that doesn't show up in flashy Instagram posts or self-help articles. It was about getting it right, even if it took longer than I ever imagined. That's when I started learning the hard way. I had to let go of the mirage of success and replace it with something much more durable. The understanding that success is a journey, not a destination. All right, So let's rewind for a second and talk about something that I think a lot of people forget when they're chasing success. Failure. That's right, failure. It's the ugly little word that no one likes to hear. But if there's one thing I can tell you from experience, it's this. Failure is the most underrated teacher you'll ever meet. I mean, think about it. We're all obsessed with winning. The goal is to climb the ladder, to be the best, to have all the shiny things. But no one tells you that you're going to have to face failure head on. It's the unspoken rule. You can't reach success without tripping and falling a few times along the way. And let me tell you, I tripped a lot. But here's the thing. Every time I failed, I learned something new. The first few failures were crushing. They hit like a freight train. I questioned my worth, my talent, my ability to do anything right. But after a while, something clicked. I realized that every setback wasn't a sign that I should give up. It was a chance to learn. It was a chance to become better, smarter, and more resilient. There's a fact that sticks with me to this day. It's been scientifically proven that the brain grows more through mistakes and failures than it does through success. The reason is simple. When we fail, we're forced to confront the things we don't know, the things we didn't see coming. This discomfort, this cognitive dissonance, is what forces us to adapt and grow. It's uncomfortable as hell, but it's the most crucial part of the process. I'll be honest, during the worst of it, I felt like I was drowning. Every failure felt like a wave crashing over me, knocking me down again and again. But eventually, I started to see the patterns. I started to understand that these failures weren't the end. They were the middle of the story. And the more I embraced them, the more I was able to grow. If I had to sum it up in one sentence, it'd be this. Failure isn't something to fear, it's something to embrace. It's like the process of sharpening a knife. You're going to get a few nicks along the way, but in the end, you'll have something sharper, more capable. It's easy to fall into the trap of wanting to avoid failure at all costs. But let me tell you this, failure is not the enemy. It's the ally you never knew you needed. You can't go through life without it. And if you try, you'll miss the lessons that truly matter. I remember the moment I hit what felt like rock bottom. It wasn't some dramatic, movie-worthy scene with thunder crashing in the background, though I wish it had been. It was just quiet, the kind of silence where you feel the weight of every decision you've made up until that point, settling on your shoulders like a pile of bricks. It was one of those days where nothing seemed to go right. The phone didn't stop ringing, but no one had anything good to say. My inbox was flooded with tasks that had been ignored for way too long. And worst of all, I felt like I was losing control over everything. It wasn't just about the project anymore. It was my whole life. The stress was palpable. I could feel it creeping into my bones. This was my tipping point. The moment where, if I hadn't made a change, I might have just given up entirely. It felt like the universe was sending me a message, screaming, "This isn't working." And honestly, I was starting to agree. But what I didn't know then was that this was exactly where I needed to be. Let's get this straight. Rock bottom isn't failure. It's a wake-up call. It's not the end of your story. It's the moment everything starts to shift. Because when there's nothing left to lose, you finally stop pretending. You stop chasing perfect, and you start building something real. Not from pressure, but from truth. That's where transformation begins. In that moment, I realized I didn't need to have everything figured out. I didn't need to be perfect. I just needed to start small. So I did. I decided to take a step back and focus on what I could control. I took a deep breath and started doing the little things, making a list, tackling one task at a time, breaking things down into manageable pieces. Something I didn't know until I lived it. Stress shrinks your perspective. It pulls your attention to what's urgent, not what's important. And in that narrow space, everything feels heavier, harder, hopeless. But the moment I gave myself permission to pause, to step back, I saw more. I felt more. And that's when things started to shift. And it wasn't easy. Far from it. But with each small action I took, I felt a bit more control slipping back into my hands. It was a process of rebuilding piece by piece. What I learned through this experience was that the world doesn't end when you hit rock bottom. In fact, hitting rock bottom can be the best thing that ever happens to you, if you choose to see it that way. We all face moments like this. Maybe you're going through one right now. But let me tell you, it's okay. It's okay to feel lost. It's okay to be unsure of the next step. The key is not to stay down. Get back up. Start with something small. It's from that place of brokenness that the most powerful transformations often emerge. Once you've hit rock bottom, there's this strange kind of clarity that starts to creep in. It's like you've cleared out all the distractions, all the noise, and you're left with nothing but yourself. And at first, that can be pretty terrifying. It's easy to get caught up in the idea that everything's falling apart, like the world's spinning out of control and there's no way to catch up. But here's the twist. When you strip everything away, you also strip away the illusions. The layers of false promises, of instant fixes, of shortcuts that were never really there. What's left? The real path. The one that doesn't promise perfection or overnight success, but the one that's actually possible. I've heard people say that sometimes you need to lose everything to find yourself. And while it sounds cliché, I can't argue with it. Because that's exactly what happened to me. When I let go of all the things I thought I needed to be happy, success, status, recognition, I started to see things in a different light. I started to see life as something more than just a checklist to be completed or a race to be won. You've probably heard the term finding your purpose thrown around. But for me, it wasn't some grand moment of enlightenment. It wasn't a light bulb turning on. It wasn't a mystical experience. It was much simpler than that. It was about rediscovering what actually mattered, what really lit me up inside. It was about realizing that the things I'd been chasing weren't even the things I truly wanted. As I started putting one foot in front of the other again, something shifted in my approach. I no longer cared about impressing others or fitting into a box. I wanted something more genuine. And the more I focused on that, the more doors started opening, not in the way I had imagined, but in a much more meaningful way. The road didn't get easier, but it did start to make more sense. Here's something interesting. In nature, when a forest burns, it may seem like everything's destroyed. But the ashes left behind are rich in nutrients, and eventually, new life begins to grow. It's a process called succession, and it's nature's way of making space for new growth. I realized that the same thing happens with people. Sometimes you have to burn away the old, the things that no longer serve you, to make space for something new and better. And that's exactly what I was doing. But this isn't some overnight transformation, let me tell you. No, it's slow. It's steady. And there are days when I still feel like I'm crawling, like I'm not quite sure where I'm going. But those are the days when I remind myself that the journey is never really linear. A few months into this new mindset, I had what I can only describe as a shift. I wasn't looking for success in the same way anymore. I wasn't checking off boxes or chasing validation. I was living in a way that felt more authentic, and that authenticity, surprisingly, became the thing that led to success. Real success, not the kind you see on TV or Instagram, but the kind that feels good to the soul. That's the trick, People are always talking about success as if it's something you can just chase and catch. But it's not that simple. The real path to success starts with being okay with who you are, right here, right now. It's not about waiting for some magical moment when everything clicks into place. It's about the process, the little steps, the small victories, the quiet moments of growth. At this point, you might be wondering, okay, I get it. Failures happen. Rock bottom can be a catalyst. But what now? How do you keep going when things still seem uncertain? Well, here's the part that's often glossed over in those feel-good success stories, the power of mindset. It's the invisible force behind every major achievement, every breakthrough, and every truly lasting transformation. And let me tell you, this isn't just some motivational fluff. Your mindset is the secret weapon you've been overlooking this whole time. I spent so much of my early journey focusing on external things, projects, timelines, things I could touch and see, that I completely neglected what was happening inside my own head. I wanted the shiny results without realizing that the true foundation of success is built within your mind. And it took me a long time to get that. I used to think that motivation was the driving force behind success. Those bursts of energy you get when you're inspired and on top of the world. But here's the thing about motivation. It's fickle. It's like a gust of wind. It's there 1 minute and gone the next. So, when motivation inevitably faded, I was left wondering what the heck had happened to my drive. And that's when I learned the real secret. Consistency, not motivation, is what creates real change. It sounds simple, right? But consistency is hard. It's a daily grind. It's the decision to do the work even when you don't feel like it. It's getting up every day and choosing to make small, positive decisions that will build the life you want. And trust me, those small steps add up faster than you think. You know what really blew my mind? Our brains can actually change, like physically. It's called neuroplasticity. So every time you catch yourself thinking differently, more kindly, more hopefully, you're not just being positive. You're literally rewiring your brain. Just like building muscle, but for your mindset. But it's not just about thinking positively, although that certainly helps. It's about training your mind to handle the challenges, the obstacles, and the doubts that will inevitably come your way. It's about choosing to face every setback with the belief that you can overcome it. The moment you adopt this mindset, you become unstoppable. In my case, this shift didn't happen overnight. It took time, effort, and a lot of mental push-ups. There were days when I still felt like I was stumbling, days when the doubts crept back in, but the difference was this. I had learned how to show up, even when the going got tough. And it wasn't just about sticking to it for the sake of it. It was about understanding that every failure, every setback, every tough day was just another step in the right direction. The real shift? I stopped just building things on the outside and started rebuilding from within. And that internal work, that changed everything. Because when your mindset upgrades, your whole life follows. It's like when you start lifting weights at the gym. At first, you might not see a difference, but every day you're putting in the work. Over time, you start noticing the muscle building, the strength increasing. The same principle applies to your mindset. It's the small, everyday shifts that lead to profound changes. This mindset shift, this inner strength, is what ultimately turned my life around. And it's the reason I'm here now, talking to you about this journey. It wasn't about waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect opportunity, or the perfect result. It was about developing the resilience to keep going, even when things weren't perfect. So, the next time you find yourself facing a challenge, or heck, when you're dealing with another setback, ask yourself, what if this is just part of the journey? What if this is the moment that leads me to my breakthrough? Because it just might be. So, let's talk about something that, in my opinion, is often overlooked in the pursuit of success: consistency. Yeah, I know, everyone talks about it. But how many of us actually practice it? The truth is, consistency is a quiet force. It doesn't demand the spotlight. It doesn't make flashy appearances. It's just there, steadily working in the background, creating long-term results that are far more valuable than any short-lived burst of motivation could ever produce. I had spent so much of my life chasing after quick wins, the kind that come with instant gratification, getting that project done, landing that big client, hitting a milestone. But I learned the hard way that those things can be so fleeting. They're like fireworks, beautiful while they last, but gone in a flash. When you live for the big moments, the small, everyday actions can seem irrelevant. But I'm here to tell you that it's the small things that build up over time and make all the difference. Think about it. We're constantly told that success comes from doing something big, something grand. But the reality is that success is a result of repeated, focused action over time. And it's not glamorous. It's not a trending hashtag or a viral post. It's waking up every morning and deciding to do the work, even when you don't feel like it. This lesson was particularly tough for me to swallow. I wanted to see big results right away. Who doesn't, right? But here's the kicker. I realized that big wins are just the result of small, repeated steps that most people overlook. It's not the 10-hour sprint that gets you there. It's the consistent 1-hour efforts that compound over time. Let's take a second to talk about a fascinating fact that really opened my eyes. Scientists say that to form a new habit, it takes an average of 66 days. That's more than 2 months of consistent practice before something new becomes ingrained in your routine. This blew my mind when I first heard it. And when I started applying this to my life, I realized how true it was. All those little tasks, those tiny efforts that I thought didn't matter, they were the ones that ultimately move the needle. But, again, it's not exciting. It's not glamorous. You're not going to get a standing ovation for your small daily wins. But over time, the effects of consistency are undeniable. That's how change happens. It's not the moment you finish the marathon. It's the weeks of training, the daily runs, the early mornings. I remember the days when I felt like I wasn't making any progress at all. But when I look back, I realized how much I'd grown, not in huge leaps, but in steady, gradual steps. There's a saying that goes, "A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step." Well, let me add something to that. A journey of 1,000 miles is one with every step you take, even when no one's watching. This one's a bit unexpected, but worth thinking about. Do you know that the honeybee is capable of flying at 15 miles per hour, but it only lasts for about 5 hours a day before needing a break? It's small, consistent efforts like this, slow, steady, but relentless, that ultimately get things done. This bee doesn't worry about racing the wind. It just does its thing day after day, and in the end, it produces something truly remarkable: honey. Now, I'm not saying you're going to be making honey, unless that's your thing, in which case, more power to you. But the point remains, small, consistent efforts are what produce long-lasting results. The grind is where success lies. And this isn't some get-rich-quick advice. I'm not promising you that consistency is going to lead to instant fame or a pile of money. What I am saying is that the consistent actions you take today, however small, are laying the foundation for the life you want to build. And that foundation is far stronger than any quick-fix plan could ever be. When you start embracing consistency, when you accept that results come with time and practice, you'll be amazed at how things start to shift. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen. And that's when the real progress begins. Let me tell you something about discipline. It's often seen as the lesser cousin of motivation. You know, motivation gets all the glory. It's the shiny, glamorous part of the journey. But discipline, it's the quiet, uncelebrated workhorse behind the scenes, carrying you through when the motivation fades away and you're left wondering why you even bothered in the first place. I'm sure you've been there, feeling all hyped up, your heart racing with excitement, thinking this time it's going to be different. You dive in, full speed ahead, checking off goals and racking up victories. But then something happens. Maybe life throws a curveball, or maybe you just hit a wall. The motivation? Gone. And suddenly, you're standing in front of your goals like there's some distant mountain you don't feel like climbing anymore. That's where discipline comes in. Motivation is a spark, but discipline is the fire that keeps burning long after the initial excitement fades. And honestly, the more I've leaned into discipline, the more I've realized how critical it is to success. You see, discipline isn't about waiting for the perfect moment or feeling good about doing something. It's about doing what you need to do, even when you don't feel like it. It's showing up day after day, doing the hard things, even when you'd rather just stay in bed and binge watch your favorite show. Once you start to embrace discipline, it becomes less of a burden and more of a way of life. The things that once felt like chores begin to feel normal. And that's when the magic happens. You start seeing progress not because you're waiting for the right time to act, but because you've made the decision to act no matter what. One thing I've learned is that discipline isn't about forcing yourself to be perfect. It's not about being rigid or inflexible. It's about sticking to your commitments and knowing that even on the days when you feel like quitting, the discipline will carry you through. You've probably heard this before, but it bears repeating. Success doesn't happen in bursts. It happens in steady, consistent effort. Let me share a surprising fact here. Do you know that a human's average level of self-control is lower than you might think? Studies show that the average person's willpower is exhausted after about 3 to 4 hours of exertion. That's why we tend to slack off when we're tired or overworked. But the key is learning to push through those moments, learning to recognize when you're about to give up, and choosing to keep going anyway. Discipline is what pushes you through those times. It's what keeps you going when your brain is begging for a break. And while motivation may come and go like a passing storm, discipline is the umbrella that keeps you dry. I'll be honest, there were plenty of times when I felt like quitting. When the excitement wore off, when the setbacks piled up, and when I felt like I wasn't getting anywhere fast. But it was discipline that got me through those tough days. One of the things that kept me disciplined was learning to love the process rather than just the outcome. At first, I was all about the results, hitting milestones, making progress. But over time, I realized that the real reward was in the act of showing up. The grind, the day-to-day work, was where I found my true growth. And here's another odd little nugget for you. Did you know that elephants, one of the most intelligent animals on the planet, learn from their environment by repetition? They can repeat the same task over and over again until they master it. I guess it's a bit of a lesson for us all. Sometimes the greatest success comes from doing something so many times that it becomes second nature. This doesn't mean you'll never feel discouraged. You will. You'll have days when you question everything. But if you keep practicing discipline, even on the hard days, you'll find that your confidence and resilience grow stronger with each step. And that's when you realize discipline isn't a trait you're born with. It's a muscle you build over time. So, if you're out there struggling to find the motivation to keep going, take a step back. Let go of the idea that success will come easily or quickly. Instead, focus on building your discipline. Make a habit, because when the going gets tough, and believe me, discipline will be the one thing that keeps you on track. Let's talk about resistance for a minute. Resistance is that sneaky, insidious force that shows up whenever you try to do something meaningful, something that could take you to the next level. It's the voice in your head that says, you don't have time for this, or what's the point? It's too late for you. It's that creeping self-doubt that makes you question every move, every step, every decision you make. And let me tell you, resistance is relentless. It doesn't matter if you're building a business, learning a new skill, or trying to get healthier. Resistance will always find a way to creep in. It doesn't care if you've been working hard for months or if you've finally started seeing progress. It will challenge you when you least expect it. And just when you think you've made it through, resistance will come back even stronger. But resistance will not be the enemy. In fact, resistance is a sign that you're on the right path. It's the universe's way of telling you that you're doing something worth doing. It's the price you pay for growth. And the more you push through it, the more you start to realize something profound. Resistance isn't as powerful as you think. At first, resistance feels like a brick wall. You try to push past it, but it's hard. It's exhausting. It makes you second-guess everything. And on those days when you feel like quitting, it can feel like you're fighting an uphill battle. But what I learned the hard way is that resistance isn't a brick wall. It's more like a door that you just need to open. And once you push through it, everything on the other side starts to make sense. One of the best ways to deal with resistance is to acknowledge it. Don't try to fight it with force. Don't try to pretend it's not there. Just admit that it's part of the process. You're not weak for feeling resistance. You're human. But once you accept it, once you realize that resistance is simply a sign that you're challenging yourself, it becomes easier to push through. There's an interesting fact here, too. Research shows that most of the time, the hardest part of a task is actually starting. Once we begin, the resistance starts to diminish, and the task becomes easier to manage. It's like the law of inertia. An object at rest stays at rest, and an object in motion stays in motion. The hardest thing is taking that first step. Once you do, the momentum begins to build, and resistance becomes less of a force to reckon with. Resistance doesn't always show up in the form of obvious roadblocks. Sometimes it's disguised as procrastination, perfectionism, or self-sabotage. We've all been there, putting things off, doubting ourselves, telling ourselves we'll do it tomorrow. But let me tell you, tomorrow never comes. The longer you wait, the harder it becomes to push through that resistance. That's why I started practicing the art of starting. Seriously, I would commit to doing something for just 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes of work, of effort. And you know what? More often than not, once I got started, I didn't want to stop. The hardest part is simply making the decision to begin. There's another odd fact I came across that really resonated with me. The idea of the paradox of choice. It turns out that the more choices we have, the harder it is to make a decision. When you're faced with a million options, your brain gets overwhelmed. And that's exactly what resistance does. It bombards you with all these what-ifs and maybe laters until you can't see straight. But once you simplify, once you make the decision to go for it, the resistance begins to melt away. So, my advice to you is this. The next time resistance shows up, because it will, don't fear it. Don't fight it. Acknowledge it, laugh at it, and then push through it. Because every time you do, you grow stronger. And when you finally make it to the other side, you'll realize that resistance was never the monster it seemed to be. It was just a speed bump on your journey to success. At some point in this journey, you're going to need to pivot. Life has a funny way of changing the rules when you least expect it. No matter how well you've planned or how perfectly things seem to be going, there will always be a curveball, an unexpected challenge, or an unplanned opportunity that forces you to change course. And this, my friend, is one of the hardest lessons you'll learn along the way. Because pivoting means letting go of what you thought was your path and embracing the unknown, the unfamiliar, and often the uncomfortable. I'll admit it, pivoting wasn't something I handled well at first. I'm someone who likes to plan, who likes to know what's coming next. And when things changed unexpectedly, it threw me off balance. I used to get frustrated, angry even when my plans didn't go according to the script. I felt like I'd lost control, like I had somehow failed. But I quickly learned that the only failure in pivoting is not being willing to adapt. The first time I had to pivot, I didn't see it as an opportunity. I saw it as a setback, as something that would delay my progress. It felt like the universe was pulling the rug out from under me just as I was starting to find my footing. But then, over time, I started noticing something remarkable. Each time I pivoted, I learned something new. Each change, of course, forced me to grow, to stretch in ways I hadn't anticipated. And here's the thing. When you embrace change, when you make the decision to pivot, you begin to realize that the world is full of opportunities you would have never seen if you stayed on the original path. Sometimes, success doesn't look like what you thought it would. It doesn't come in the package you imagined. But it comes. It always comes if you're open to it. Pivoting is tough because it requires you to let go of your ego. You have to admit that the path you thought was best for you isn't the one you should be walking. It's not easy to do, but it's necessary. The beauty of pivoting is that it creates space for new possibilities. Possibilities you wouldn't have even considered if you'd stubbornly held onto the old way. An interesting fact about pivoting is successful companies know how to pivot when needed. Take Netflix, for example. It wasn't always the streaming giant we know today. Netflix started as a DVD rental service, then pivoted to streaming, and now it's a content powerhouse. They didn't just change with the times. They anticipated change and embraced it. That's the secret to surviving and thriving in an ever-changing world. But pivoting doesn't always mean making a massive change like a business. Sometimes it's about making small, incremental shifts in your thinking or approach. It could be changing the way you work, the people you surround yourself with, or even your mindset about success. I found that small pivots can sometimes be more powerful than big, dramatic ones. It's like steering a ship. A small turn of the wheel makes a huge difference in the direction you're heading. The toughest part of pivoting is not the change itself. It's overcoming the fear of it. The fear that you might fail, that you might regret your decision, or that things will get worse. But let me tell you something. It's much scarier to stay stuck in something that isn't working than it is to try something new. When you make a pivot, even if it doesn't work out the way you expected, you're still learning. You're still growing. And that's the real victory. What I've learned about pivoting is this. The more flexible you are, the more resilient you become. And resilience? That's one of the most important traits you could develop on this journey. Life doesn't wait for you to be ready. It throws curveballs and expects you to catch them. The sooner you learn how to pivot, how to adjust and adapt, the sooner you'll see the bigger picture. And it will be far more beautiful and fulfilling than the original plan. So, when life presents you with a fork in the road, don't be afraid to take the other path. It might be just what you need to move forward. Trust me on this one. When you pivot with purpose, you're not losing anything. You're gaining everything. Here's a thought for you. Success isn't just about doing everything right. In fact, some of the most successful people in the world have learned more from their failures than their successes. It's an odd concept, isn't it? But if you look at any great figure, whether it's an entrepreneur, an athlete, or even a scientist, you'll find that their journey to the top is paved with more missteps than triumphs. And you know what? That's okay. Because failure isn't the opposite of success. It's part of the process. I've been there. I've made mistakes. Big ones. And there were days when I thought those mistakes would be the end of me. But then something remarkable happened. I realized that every failure wasn't a sign of weakness or incompetence. It was a lesson. And each lesson brought me closer to success. The key to mastering failure is to stop seeing it as a defeat. Instead, see it as feedback. That's the real magic. The best way to learn is by doing, and doing means getting things wrong sometimes. Every mistake you make adds another layer of experience to your journey, and that experience is invaluable. It's like building muscle. You have to tear the fibers first before they get stronger. So, when you fail, you're not broken. You're being forged into something stronger. There's a scientific fact I want to share here that blows my mind every time I think about it. Our brains grow more from mistakes than they do from successes. In fact, making mistakes stimulates the part of the brain that's responsible for problem solving and learning. It's like your brain gets a workout every time you mess up. So, don't be afraid to fail. Embrace it, because with each failure, you're becoming smarter, stronger, and more prepared for the next challenge. I know. It's hard to see failure as something positive when it feels like the world is falling apart around you. It's tempting to throw in the towel and say, I can't do this. But if you can shift your perspective, you'll start to see failure as a stepping stone instead of a stumbling block. And that shift in perspective is what turns the tide. I can't tell you how many times I've failed, how many times I've thought I was done for. But I kept going. And each time I picked myself up, I learned something new. The more I failed, the more I grew. The more I faced failure, the more I started to understand that success wasn't some magical destination. It was a result of the choices I made in response to failure. One of the most significant moments of growth in my life came when I stopped fearing failure. I stopped seeing it as something to avoid and started seeing it as something to learn from. I realized that the only real failure is not trying, not learning, not pushing through the hard times. If you're willing to keep going, to keep learning, there is no such thing as failure. This is where the power of failure comes in. It's not about avoiding it. It's about learning to rise every time you fall. That's the real key to success. The more you embrace failure, the more resilient you become. And it's resilience, more than anything, that leads to lasting success. It's interesting how our culture has built failure up to be something so catastrophic. Yet, in many cultures around the world, failure is seen as an essential part of growth. In fact, there's a Japanese concept called Kaizen, which means continuous improvement. The idea behind Kaizen is that every small failure is just a step toward improvement. So, rather than viewing failure as something to fear, you start seeing it as an opportunity to improve and grow. You might not realize this. Even the world's top companies failed more than once. Apple didn't create the iPhone overnight. They stumbled, scrapped ideas, and started over again and again. But they didn't quit. They turned every misstep into a lesson, and every lesson into momentum. That's how real success is built. Not from perfection, but persistence. So, if you're in the middle of a failure right now, I want you to remember this. It's not the end. It's just the beginning. Every failure is a lesson in disguise. And if you keep showing up, if you keep learning, success will eventually follow. There's something that gets overlooked when people talk about success. It's not just about what you do, it's also about who you become in the process. Sure, everyone wants to reach their goals, to get to that place of recognition or financial freedom, or whatever it is you're striving for. But the truth is, the most important part of your journey isn't the goal itself. It's the person you evolve into along the way. I used to be fixated on reaching a specific destination. I thought that once I reached that milestone, I would finally have everything I wanted, and that would be the end of the road. But over time, I realized that the destination was never really the point. It's the journey, the growth, the lessons, the obstacles that defines who you become. And when you learn to embrace the process, that's when success feels truly fulfilling. Think about it. If you achieve a goal, but you haven't changed, if you haven't grown, what was the point? That's when success becomes hollow. The real success is in becoming a stronger, more resilient, more capable version of yourself. And that transformation happens every single day, with every decision, every struggle, and every small victory. One of the most profound shifts in my life happened when I stopped chasing a perfect version of success and started focusing on how I could improve as a person. I began to see challenges as opportunities to grow, not as obstacles to avoid. I started asking myself, who do I need to become to achieve this? And suddenly, things started to make sense. There's an interesting concept in psychology called identity-based habits. The idea is that when you focus on who you want to become instead of just what you want to achieve, you're more likely to succeed. For example, if your goal is to become healthier, it's not enough to just say, I want to lose weight. Instead, you have to ask, who do I need to be to achieve this? What kind of person am I becoming in this process? And once you shift your identity from someone who struggles with health to someone who values their well-being, you start making choices that align with that new identity. This was a game changer for me. I stopped seeing success as a goal to be checked off and started seeing it as a reflection of the person I was becoming. This shift in perspective changed everything. It didn't make the journey easier, but made it far more meaningful. I stopped focusing on the result, and I started focusing on the process. And that's when the magic happened. Here's a cool little fact. Studies show that people who focus on identity-based habits are more likely to succeed in their goals. This is because when your identity is tied to your actions, you're more motivated to follow through. It's no longer about temporary willpower or external rewards. It's about becoming the person you want to be. So, as you continue on your journey, remember that success isn't just about reaching a destination. It's about who you become along the way. And if you focus on growing, on becoming the best version of yourself, success will follow naturally. Because at the end of the day, the greatest accomplishment isn't the goal you reach, it's the person you become in the process. But don't get me wrong, this doesn't mean you won't face challenges. You will. The road to success is never without its bumps. But with each challenge, you'll be developing the skills, mindset, and resilience you need to reach your goals. And when you look back, you'll realize that the journey was just as important as the destination. You see, success is not about perfection. It's not about being flawless or never making mistakes. It's about progress. It's about the daily commitment to becoming a better version of yourself. And as you build that version, you'll start to see that success isn't a final destination. It's an ongoing journey, a journey that keeps expanding as you do. I've learned that when you focus on personal growth, the external success starts to take care of itself. The opportunities, the achievements, the recognition, it all follows. And when you finally reach your goal, you won't just have accomplished something. You'll have transformed into the person who is worthy of that success. So, take a moment to reflect on where you are now. Ask yourself, who am I becoming? Are you the person you want to be? If not, that's okay. It's never too late to start. The journey is ongoing, and as long as you're committed to growing, you're always moving in the right direction. It's around this point that you begin to understand something truly transformative about success. It's not linear. We like to think that success is a straight line, that if we just work hard enough, we'll steadily climb upward. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that success looks more like a messy, winding road than a smooth highway. There are going to be days when you feel like you're making progress, and there will be other days when you feel like you've taken 2 steps back. And that's okay, because success is not a destination you reach. It's a process, a long and often unpredictable journey that requires patience, persistence, and, most of all, faith. I'll admit, it took me a long time to accept that success doesn't happen in a straight line. I wanted things to be simple, predictable, easy. I thought that if I just kept grinding, kept doing everything right, things would start falling into place. But life, as always, had other plans. There were moments when I felt like I was stuck, like no matter how much effort I put in, I wasn't seeing the results I expected. I was frustrated. I thought I was doing everything right, but still, things weren't moving forward the way I thought they should. But here's the thing. Success doesn't always show up in the way you think it will. It doesn't arrive when you expect it. It doesn't happen just because you follow a set of rules. It's unpredictable. Sometimes the best progress comes after a series of setbacks, a few missteps, and a lot of uncertainty. And the beauty of this unpredictable journey is that it teaches you something invaluable. The ability to keep going when things aren't perfect, when the road isn't clear, and when you have no idea what's coming next. I remember being in that space of uncertainty, feeling like I was stuck. But then something clicked. I realized that success doesn't come from getting everything right. It comes from being willing to keep going, even when you don't know how things will turn out. And that's when I started to see the true value of failure and setbacks. They weren't stopping me, they were teaching me. There's a fascinating concept called anti-fragility. It's the idea that some things don't just survive in the face of adversity. They actually become stronger. Think about it. A muscle, when stressed, tears and rebuilds stronger than before. The same goes for your resilience. The more setbacks you face, the more you learn, the more you grow. So, every time you feel like you're moving backward, remember, you're not. You're becoming more anti-fragile. You're building the strength to handle whatever comes next. The unpredictable nature of success also teaches you the importance of adaptability. It's not just about sticking to a single plan. It's about learning how to adapt when things don't go as planned. The people who succeed are the ones who can adapt, who can change course without losing sight of their ultimate goal. Flexibility and perseverance are far more important than rigidity and stubbornness. Let me give you an example. One of the greatest entrepreneurs of our time, Elon Musk, didn't follow a straight path to success. He had multiple failures, from the collapse of his first startup to the near bankruptcy of Tesla and SpaceX. Yet, each time he adapted, he pivoted, and he emerged stronger, not because he avoided failure, but because he embraced it and learned from it. This adaptability is what set him apart and is key to his success. What I've come to realize is that success isn't about avoiding the setbacks, the failures, or the wrong turns. It's about how you respond to them. It's about taking each challenge and using it as a lesson to refine your approach. The key to success is learning to keep going, to stay adaptable, and to trust that even when things don't go as planned, you're moving in the right direction. If you're in a season where things feel uncertain or stagnant, remember this: success is not a straight line. It's a process full of twists and turns, detours and challenges. The key is to keep moving forward, even when the road ahead isn't clear. Embrace the unpredictability, because it's in those moments of uncertainty that you find the strength to rise higher. In fact, sometimes the most important part of the journey is learning to be comfortable with the discomfort of not knowing exactly where you're headed. Success isn't about having a clear path. It's about creating one as you go. And the more you embrace that uncertainty, the more it becomes part of your journey. Let's take a moment to dive into something that, for me, really changed the way I approach success: gratitude. Now, you might be thinking, gratitude? Isn't that just some feel-good word people throw around to sound wise? And for a while, I thought that too. But here's the twist. Gratitude is more powerful than we give it credit for. It's not just a tool to feel better in the moment. It's a game changer for your long-term success. When I was caught up in the rush to achieve, to check off goals and hit milestones, I barely took a breath to appreciate where I was. I was too focused on what I hadn't done, the things still on my to-do list, and the failures that had come my way. I never stopped to acknowledge the progress I'd made, the lessons I'd learned, or the people who had helped me along the way. And that, my friend, was a big mistake. Gratitude isn't just about saying thank you. It's about shifting your entire perspective on life. It's about acknowledging the good, even in the tough moments. It's about finding the silver lining, even when everything feels like it's falling apart. And when you start practicing gratitude, something incredible happens. Your mindset shifts. You begin to see the world differently. You start to appreciate the process, the small victories, the lessons learned, the people who help you along the way, rather than constantly chasing the next big thing. I remember the moment this clicked for me. I was having one of those everything's going wrong days. I was frustrated, tired, and felt like I wasn't making any progress. But then I took a step back and made myself list 5 things I was grateful for, no matter how small. And suddenly, my whole perspective shifted. I stopped seeing myself as a failure and started seeing myself as someone who was learning and growing. I realized that even the setbacks were valuable. Even the failures were stepping stones. They were part of the journey, and I was grateful for them. Gratitude is powerful because it rewires your brain. It shifts your focus from what you don't have to what you do. Studies have shown that people who practice gratitude regularly experience improved mental health, better relationships, and even physical health benefits. And it's not just about feeling good. It's about creating a mindset that fuels your success. When you appreciate the small things, the big things begin to fall into place. I also realized that gratitude helps you stay grounded. It keeps you humble, especially when things start going well. It's easy to get caught up in the hype, to start believing that you've figured it all out, that you're invincible. But gratitude reminds you that success is a gift, not a given. It keeps you focused on the people, the experiences, and the lessons that got you to where you are. I came across a fascinating fact recently. Did you know that practicing gratitude can actually boost your resilience? That's right. People who regularly express gratitude are better able to handle stress, setbacks, and adversity. It's like building a muscle that helps you bounce back from tough situations. When things don't go according to plan, gratitude helps you maintain perspective. It reminds you that you've overcome challenges before, and you'll overcome them again. Incorporating gratitude into my life wasn't just a feel-good practice. It became a core part of my success journey. The more I embraced gratitude, the more I saw opportunities, the more I connected with people, and the more I felt equipped to handle the challenges that came my way. And when you have a foundation of gratitude, you stop fearing failure. You start seeing it as part of the process, part of the growth. If you haven't yet, I challenge you to start practicing gratitude daily. Take 5 minutes every day, first thing in the morning or right before bed, and think about what you're grateful for. Start small. It could be as simple as being grateful for a good meal, a supportive friend, or the fact that you woke up this morning. But make it a habit. And as you start focusing on the good, you'll begin to notice that the bad doesn't seem so overwhelming. You'll see the blessings in your life more clearly, and that clarity will fuel your journey forward. Gratitude has a way of keeping you grounded and focused, no matter how far along the road you are. It makes you appreciate the journey and not just the destination. And in doing so, it brings success to your doorstep, not just as a goal, but as a way of life. As we near the end of this journey, I want to leave you with one final thought. Success is not a destination you ever truly reach. It's an ongoing journey, one that evolves as you do. We often think of success as something you achieve, check off a list, and then move on to the next thing. But in reality, success is an ever-changing process that demands growth, adaptation, and perseverance. And that's the beauty of it. If you've been following along, you've seen that success isn't about working harder, hustling 24/7, or achieving perfect outcomes. It's about understanding who you're becoming along the way and embracing the messy, unpredictable nature of the journey. There will be moments of triumph, yes, but there will also be moments of doubt, frustration, and failure. And that's okay, because in the end, success is about showing up every day, putting in the work, and learning from both your successes and your setbacks. The most important thing I've learned through this process is that success isn't measured by how much money you make, how many people know your name, or how many awards you collect. Success is about the person you become, the mindset you cultivate, the resilience you build, and the way you handle life's challenges. It's about looking back and knowing that you gave it your all, that you never gave up, and that you grew into someone better than you were before. So what's next? Well, the journey never ends. Success isn't a final destination. It's a series of steps, a lifetime of learning, adapting, and evolving. Every time you hit a milestone, there will be new challenges to face. Every time you think you've made it, there will be another mountain to climb. And that's the point. The journey itself is the reward. The person you become along the way is the real treasure. As you move forward, remember this. Success isn't about finding the perfect path. It's about creating your own, one step at a time. And while the road may be winding and uncertain, it's yours. It's uniquely yours. And that makes it beautiful. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to pivot. Don't be afraid to change course when you need to. Embrace the challenges, the setbacks, and the uncertainty because they're part of the process. And as you embrace them, you'll find that success is less about reaching some finish line and more about enjoying the ride. You've got this. It might not be easy. It might not always be clear. But as long as you keep going, as long as you keep showing up and doing the work, you're on the right path. The journey itself is the reward, and the person you become along the way is your greatest success.